Billingsley became aware of funding for and interest in producing a film about Chechnya, and his expertise in the area was a natural fit. So he left New York and his job to spend 2 years filming the documentary Immortal Fortress. He brought the film to Utah, where post-production was done at KBYU. While he was wrapping up that film, Sterling Van Wagenen of KBYU TV asked him if he would be interested in doing a film about China, and more specifically, Helen Foster Snow. Billingsley soon became familiar with Snow's life, especially the pivotal 9-year period that she spent in China. He teamed up with Eric Heyer, political science professor and lecturer this semester in our series, to produce Helen Foster Snow, Witness to Revolution. Billingsley attended Columbia University, where he received his undergraduate degree in peace studies. He received a master's degree in war studies from King's College, the Department of War Studies at the University of London. He has shown the film Immortal Fortress, his film on Chechnya, at a conference in London. He has since filmed wars in Afghanistan and Iraq. We're very pleased to welcome Mr. Dodge Billingsley, who will today be speaking about Operation Iraqi Freedom from his own personal experience. Dodge.
Excuse me. I want to thank the Center for having me here again today. And as I thought about what I wanted to talk about, it just occurred to me there's so many things we could discuss when it comes to the war in Iraq. I think everybody has an opinion about it, and everybody has feelings about it, or in many cases have known people who have actually been there, fought there. And so what I thought I would do is give just a general outline of what my experience was in the context of the experience of the war, or say the war, which now may be better referred to as the first phase of the war, the operation from Kuwait into Baghdad and seizing all the key regime targets, and up to the point about mid-April, about 2 weeks before President Bush declared that the combat operations were over. At that point, I'd like to talk about a few things thematically, specifically how the war was fought just on the tip of the sword, so to speak, or the blunt edge of foreign policy, and then talk about some issues about collateral damage, rules of engagement, and what's going on now, because I think it does reflect phase 2, or whatever you want to characterize this period or call this period. It does reflect what's going on. It helps us to understand what's going on in Iraq right now. I also had made a film, Virgin Soldiers. You probably saw it up on the screen. It was a British production. I followed a group of Marines all the way to their last combat objectives, and I left when they went to Block 2, or stabilization operations. I'll show a couple clips of that. It's difficult to show that because anybody who's been around the military knows that they like to swear a lot. And this being BYU, it's just, I don't know how appropriate it is, but it's really, I'm going to be stopping and starting because I don't have that much time to bleep out everything. It would just take me days. But there are a few small sections I can show with reasonable success. And you'll still get the gist of it. But I first want to go, like I said, and tell you a little bit about the general experience, how I got there. And at any time, we definitely will have questions, lots of time for questions, but at any time in this, if you want to ask a question, please feel free. As you'll see, there's a map here on the screen, and it is a map of sort of the order of battle and how the operation began. Let me first back up and say, I was embedded with a unit of Marines out of 29 Palms, California. I was originally with the 101st Airborne, and I had done some work with them in Afghanistan in Operation Anaconda and some other missions. And I thought I'd go back with the 101st, but I got the sense, talking to them, that all they were really going to do was guard the FARP, which basically meant they were going to guard the refueling point for the Apache helicopters. Because what makes the 101st valuable, one of the more, I don't know if it's the more valuable, but a critical part of the U.S. military is that its strike or attack helicopter capability. A lot of times, however, their infantry gets tasked to guard those helicopters. And I was afraid, as I could start to see the plans develop when I was out at Fort Campbell in November and December, that I didn't think they were going to have a combat mission. Finally, a friend of mine in the 5th Special Forces Group, which was also located at Fort Campbell, Kentucky, told me, he goes, don't go with the 101st. And I really appreciated that tip, because I can't tell you why, obviously, but just go with the Marines. And it turned out, I think, to be a good call. I mean, I had a really good experience with this group, 3-7 Marines out of 29 Palms, 1st Marine Division. And I'm going to go ahead and explain a little bit on the map what happened. We left California on the 23rd of January, and we ended up in Kuwait about 3 days later, in a number of different camps all along this northern edge of Kuwait here. And you can tell, you can see some of the stuff I'll tell you. Like there's the 101st Airborne right there. 101st, the 101st, actually you can't see all of it from here. And the map's it's not entirely accurate, but it's a pretty good job. Basically, the blue are the different U.S. units. The lighter blue are the British units. The red units are, of course, Iraqi units. And as you can see, a couple interesting things is that the Iraqi units were basically in the southern part along the Iranian border for Iranian-Iraqi security issues, and then, of course, surrounding and blocking approaches to Baghdad from the south. And then there were some other units up north. The field manual, DoD field manual, came out in October 2002, just prior to the assault, Operation Iraqi Freedom, had actually specified where all the Iraqi armor was. And they were saying that there was about 1,000 pieces of armor surrounding Baghdad, ringing Baghdad in Republican Guard divisions or units. And there was a lot of armor and heavy units down here. And then, of course, they've always maintained a presence on the Iranian border because they have their own security issues with Iran. The basic gist of this map is correct. The Army came up on the west, and they swung out across the desert. Their whole idea was to come in and hit Baghdad from the west. The Marines were going to just take right across the border, boom, hit Safwan, take Basra, in this area here. And while the Army was swinging this way, the Marines were going to basically come down the river valley here and go up the middle. And they were going to come here. The Army was going to go to the west. The Marines would attack from the east into Baghdad. The Army was going to attack from the west. Of course, the interesting thing about conflict is that as soon as the first shot is fired, plans change all the time. I mean, frag orders, we were getting 4 or 5 an hour. We were basically zigzagging across, going to one objective to the next objective to the next objective because the battlefield changed so rapidly and so quick. When I got to to Kuwait on the 25th of January, we thought we'll be in Iraq in like 10 days or 20 days. And then it was a month went by, and I went to an S2 briefing, which was an intel briefing, and to get the plan for our unit. And it turned out that we were going to be supported by British forces, we were going to seize Safwan and take an Iraqi military, a mechanized infantry division, the 51st. They were located right here. Our unit was going to take this division. Once we secured it, the British were going to come in, relieve us in place, and then that's all the further the British were going to go. And then we were going to continue moving up. When I realized our unit that was going to replace us was the 7th Armor, and they were still on the ships and heading from England, I thought, oh man, we're here for another 3-4 weeks. And so we actually took some time off in Kuwait City and did some sightseeing and stuff. I left the camp and just headed into town, took some time. And finally the British showed up, everything else got in place. They moved across the border on the 20th of March. However, it's interesting, like I said, battle changes. And it's interesting because you think of foreign policy, and you think of the decision to use military force as an aspect of foreign policy, that despite all the computer screens and the high-level meetings at the Pentagon and everything, when you get down to the actual unit size, this foreign policy is carried out by people 18 to 25 years old, enlisted and NCOs. They do it. I mean, I call them sometimes the blunt edge of the sword, or the blunt edge of foreign policy. And not to demean them at all, because we had a very good time, but the guys I was with, the oldest guy was 23. And I lived with them in this AAV. It's an armored personnel carrier. It doesn't seat 19, but you squeeze 19 people in there, and it was just hell on earth to live in that thing. And to advance all the way up 20 days, it took 21 days. As we were getting ready to attack Safwan, to cross Safwan, we had a report, turned out to be a false report, that 180 Iraqi T-72 tanks were counterattacking across the border. It stopped our whole entire progress because they had to sort this out. This is a major issue if there really were that many Iraqi tanks. And I remember sitting in the AAV and everyone's going, well, how could they get 180 tanks down to the border? What happened to our air power? What happened to our intelligence? What happened to the Predators? Why couldn't we see this stuff? It turned out to be 12 tanks. But people get ramped up. It just call it the fog of war, if you will. And so we actually stalled on the border as everybody went across because our area was being hit by 12 Iraqi tanks. The way infantry travels, and then the Marines, it's a little different in the Army, but not too much. you have your tanks first, and then you have CAT, which stands for Combined Arms Team. Usually Humvees mounted with 50 caliber machine guns or TOW missiles. And they follow the tanks. And then behind is the AAV, which is these armored personnel carriers. The Army uses a Bradley. And that's where your infantry, your mechanized infantry, sit until there's a target for these infantry soldiers to dismount and to engage. And so we're always in a column: tanks, CAT, and infantry, and then logistics train, log train in the back. And the idea was when you come across an infantry target or a building that had to be seized or a compound that had to be taken, the column split into a V, and we would jump out of the track and do the fighting. And what happened for most of the engagements that I saw and that I heard of were that tanks would meet Iraqi tanks or would meet Iraqi armor, or they'd take an RPG shot or something through a track and it would stop the tank. They'd get a mobility kill. Usually the crew would jump out of the tank and just get onto another one. But by the time the infantry would dismount to engage, by the time we'd get out of the AAV to fight, there was very rarely any Iraqis there. So the whole war, in my opinion, for most of us, was characterized by these battles that never really happened. We all started them. We would attack the complex. And what we'd find is there would be maybe 20 or 30 Iraqis. They'd shoot for 10, 15, 20 minutes and then surrender very quickly. And it was as if they were just putting up a show of, saving face, and then they would be so happy to surrender. And that's what happened. When we hit this mechanized brigade, this infantry division, we hit one of the brigade headquarters, the unit I was with took 13 Iraqi prisoners, a colonel and 12 enlisted. Anyway, the Army's sweeping up through here. Marines are coming up the middle. The British are following on behind. On the 25th, you may have heard about this, in the news. It seemed everybody across the front was ambushed. Not everybody, but units all the way, all U.S. units. It seemed like somebody took fire. We were ambushed on the road somewhere up here. 5 Marines were hit really hard. They had a number of casualties in that. There was a big sandstorm, and what had happened was 5th Marines were supposed to come and hit the left flank to screen for the 7th, and the 7th, which I was with, we were going to head up right up the middle. It turned out the 5th, as they moved into their flanking position, they got hit very hard, and they sustained a number of casualties, a number of RPGs. One of the soldiers I know, one of the Marines, had a digital camera. Now it's his helmet. They turned it on before the battle, and it's the wildest thing I've ever seen, like 40, 50 RPGs in a 30-second period, just going, and sometimes you don't even know how anybody got out of it alive. But these were short bursts, and then hit-and-run type attacks, and then they would withdraw, and then you would very rarely ever engage in these sustained firefights. I'm just going to go to another map toward the end, and then I'm going to show you some video. This projector's pretty cool, huh? Okay. This is on April 6th. By April 6th, you can see that the British have taken firm control, firm control. They occupied these positions. There were still pockets of resistance. The Marines were, in fact, going up the middle. There's 7th Marines. That's the unit I was with up on the outskirts of Baghdad. That's at Salman Pak military facility. 1st Marines, 24th MU, and the Army again taking the whole western flank here. What basically happened is on the 9th, everybody rolled into Baghdad, the Army from the west, the Marines from the east. The river right down the middle of the city became the dividing line between the Army operations and Marine operations. At this point, these units here headed east to hit these units. When they got there, there was nobody there. No one there. They just kind of deserted. We were supposed to hit a Republican Guard unit, the Al-Nida Division. By the time we got there, we saw hundreds of young Iraqi men walking down the road in civilian clothes, waving, smoking cigarettes. Everybody was all friends, and that was the Al-Nida Republican Guard Division. And but it brings up an interesting point, and something that I think we're being plagued with now. The U.S. is being plagued with now, and that is what happened to the Iraqi military? Regardless of a lot of the news, which was very sensationalized, and you have to understand the nature of news is to tell a better story than the other news guy, right? It is about ratings. So you take what you have and you make it as gigantic as possible. I came back and have a friend in the CBS bureau in London, looked at some of the footage of some of the firefights in quotation that I was in, which to me were like 2 shots fired, and we would send 1,000 rounds back down range. And the news reports on those were these hour-long firefights. The stories became a bit embellished. It isn't to say that there weren't casualties. There obviously were. But like, for instance, Al-Naziriyah, the Army rolled through, half the Marines rolled through until this unit rolled through. When this unit rolled through, they got hit real hard. They took like 9 dead and 71 injured. Same thing in Al-Qut. Marine unit came through, no big deal. Second one came through, boom, got hit really hard again. We were in their trail, we ended up bypassing and going here and then up. So there were pockets. Obviously, the U.S. Army had to fight some stuff at the airport and some other places, but these were short, sustained attacks. Everybody wondered what happened to the Iraqi military. Where are they? But the big question was, were they going to show up later? And that is what's, I think, more important now, because you see that U.S. casualties have gone up since May 1st. There's been more people killed in Iraq from May 1st to the present than there were from the beginning of combat operations on March 20th and to May 1st. So there's some really interesting questions we could talk about a little bit. The other thing I think is important, and to frame it up a little bit, is talk about ROEs, or rules of engagement, and collateral damage. I'm going to show you a clip on this film. Can we go to DVD? This could be tricky, so do you know how to operate this one too?
It's just like a touchpad. So.
I'm going to show you a little bit about rules of engagement, and then I'm going to show you a scene that happened at a bus stop, and then we're going to talk about this a little bit. And this technology is the hardest stuff to ever master, I think. Let's see. Does anybody have any questions or comments while we're sorting through this? Okay. The expert's coming up. He can work it.
Okay, right here.
Got a question.
Yeah.
During the battles, what did you do? Were you kind of in the AAV?
Yeah.
Did they give you a gun? They said,
Yeah.
actually, though, just what happened?
Okay. Actually, they did offer me a gun in LSA, and because I was in the lead AAV of infantry, if we were going to dismount, which is where I wanted to be. And I thought about, DOD says, no way you can't have a gun. That's totally against the rules as a non-combatant. I also, however, of the opinion, and I found this out in Chechnya, my first experience with this was in Chechnya. If you go that far to the front, there's no safe quarter for a non-combatant. That's just stupid to think so. So you must be prepared. And I made that decision in Chechnya because we had to fight other Russian units, and there were other Chechen units that didn't like the Chechen unit I was with. And the Chechens made it quite clear in the very beginning when they handed me an AK-47. You know how to shoot it? Yeah. Okay. You're expected to pitch in if we have a fire. If we're in an ambush, you've got to fight for all, everybody. And that made a lot of sense to me. I had no illusion that I was going to be spared because I was an outsider. Because two, they don't even sort that out till it's all over anyway. So when they offered the unit, DOD says no guns, obviously. The unit I was with, these guys, company commander says, you want an M16? And I said, well, I don't really want an M16 because I can't carry it anyway and shoot, with the camera. So he said, well, how about I said, I'll take a 9mm if you've got a 9mm. He said, well, let me see if I have one. But they had like 7 extra M16s and no extra 9mm, and so I didn't take one. What I did do, which is, again, against the rules, but if I'm going to jump off the lead track into, it's like one of our sergeants said, he goes, the scariest thing about jumping out of the track when you hear the tank fire ahead of you and the machine gun fire, and each one of these AAVs has a Mark 19 gun on it, and it's popping off rounds, is when the back door opens, you don't know if you're going to catch a face full of rounds or what. And that was the scariest part for everybody, is that door just kind of, everybody was really afraid at that particular time. Once you jump out and adrenaline takes over and then training takes over, everybody was fine. But boy, there were some anxious moments in there when you're rolling into a position and you hear the fighting outside, but you don't know what to see. Because, when you're down to AV, you see nothing. So what I did was I stuffed my pockets full of ammo clips and decided that I wouldn't ever need to pick up a gun unless somebody was somebody's hit beside me or too many people were hit, and if that's the case, there's going to be guns laying around. So I wanted to make sure I had some ammunition. So that's what I did. So, all right. This is the show we made, Virgin Soldiers. The Marines hate the title. The British loved it. It's a British production, so they got to call the shots. These poor guys, they were so upset. Virgin Soldiers. But I think the implication was obviously they hadn't been in combat, right? So that was the idea anyway. I've got a number of scenes. Like I said, I'm going to try to do the stop-start thing and see if I can save you guys from all the four-letter nonsense. Okay, this is discussing ROEs. The trouble is with doing it this way is it's not going to have too much flow. But what I want to point out is this is the squad I'm with. Take it from the Pentagon, the White House, foreign policy, the Pentagon, military decision, Central Command who moves to Qatar, all the way down. And then, who carries out that foreign policy? A lot of groups like this, no bigger than this group right here.
Okay, when we're moving up, we're going to make a wedge. Keel's going to be in the rear. India on the left. Lima on the right. Alpha tanks to the front. India and Lima are going to push. We're going to push. Their mission is push straight through the oil fields. Kilo Company, they're basically a mop-up crew. They're going to go through and find, sweep everything through the oil fields. And Alpha tanks are going to be located in the general area of Tampa. All right. You guys got any questions?
Do you have any ROEs?
What is engagement?
Yes.
We're getting... It's combat.
Kill them
You
all.
can't shoot, if they're not a combatant, don't shoot them. If they're trying to surrender, don't shoot them. If they're walking towards you with a weapon in their hand and they won't put up their hands, that's combatant. Alright? Or if they're running away with a weapon in their hand, that's still a combatant because he didn't drop his weapon.
E means yes and na means no. Stop a goof. Families, we are American. Well, they know we're Americans.
It gets more interesting, but a lot more colorful at the same time from here. That's the tip of the sword for the, and it's all squad level. Like I say, they're young guys. They're doing the best they can, but they deal with rules of engagement. They deal with language, very minimal language training in Arabic, and they have to make a number of decisions quite quickly. And I want to show you another scene, if you don't mind. Hey, I'm getting the hang of this. Okay. Let's see if I can skip through here. Actually, what I wanted to show you was the attack on the Fedayeen complex. It was our last objective. It was in central eastern Baghdad. And it was basically get out and fight. It was one of the few times where we actually thought that there was going to be some Iraqis there, so we fought. So I'm going to try to show this to you. There's a couple.
All right now, everybody's going to load up. Get on the tracks. We're going to stage by 8:09, we're stepping. By 0:10, we're going to be in the compound, hooking and jabbing. The compound itself is
Oh, now I've messed it up. I was trying really hard to not... Okay, I'm probably going to get in trouble. There's I know there's 3 swear words in this thing, but I don't know how to get rid of them or how to go fast through it. Are we at that?
No problem.
All right, but okay. I warned you.
All right now, everybody's gonna load up. Get on the tracks. We're gonna stage by 8:09. We're stepping. By 0:10, we're gonna be in the compound, hooking and jabbing. The compound itself is about 2 clicks away, and there's nothing larger than about a company size left of the whole Iraqi military.
Fucking A.
In support, we're gonna have 81s, 311. We're gonna have 2 Cobras on station.
God.
Fixed wing. Freaking.
Fuck everything up.
We're gonna have a stay. As far as our attachments, we're gonna have javelin, stay, tanks. We're gonna have a heck team and psyops.
Ah, so we'll get to hear music.
Team right here right now. Just get down on the ground right now. Orientate. Get another team. That's our spot. Take the military. Get 2 teams right now. Support by fire.
Hey, 2 teams over to the right. Bump on the right side of Hartman, support by 5. Right? Move up. Go with them. Go with them. Get out. That's our capital. Fucking gun anyway. You know what I mean? Yeah, but you gotta get the green light first. That's our capital. Hey, we got women and children in here. Hey, watch the casino. Watch the casino. There's women and children in the building. Hey, we're running to the pawn shop. To the building and everybody's supported by firearm, right? I need a green light from one actual or staff sergeant. We're already we need confirmation on the green light to shoot it. They're asking, hey, they're finding out now. Another day, another dollar. Make a girl scream and holler. No girls, no Iraqis. Once again. Every time we go to a fucking base, they run. Helps my job, make my job easier.
Okay. As I mentioned before, there were very few stand and fight. And I think it has greater implications than just the fact that they didn't show up and they may be fighting now. What it really says is in 1991, especially, I think Iraq and a large portion of the world realized they could not fight American forces in an open battlefield. This isn't to say, this is just a fact. I mean, in 1991, after the first Gulf War, let's put it this way, everybody started thinking, there's no way we're going to ever mix up with the U.S. in a tank engagement in open desert warfare. The Russians completely went to a redesign effort on all their main battle tanks because they watched how the U.S. tanks just basically obliterated the Iraqi Soviet-era armor. And now what you see in Iraq is a number of, it's guerrilla warfare, if you want to call it that, the elements of urban warfare. At the same time, you have a lot of sniping incidents. You have mobility kills, mines, RPGs. But, the thing I want to tell you is that, we took RPG shots. We were shot at almost every single day. I was eating MRE with the one you just heard there saying another day, another dollar, little Muniz from New York, very funny Puerto Rican kid. And he's eating his MRE, and our RPG literally goes about 5 feet through him, past another guy, past me. And we were so tired, nobody even got up. And he just kept eating. It's like, oh, man, these Iraqis. Because by then you knew that if the first RPG did not get you, there wasn't really going to be a second or a third. And that was the nature of the conflict. They'd take their chance. They'd try to hit you. And that's what happened. I know 3-5 Marines took an RPG. The back of the AAV opened up, and RPG went right inside. It blew up, ignited the fuel tank, blew the turret off. It killed everybody in the track in an instant. All their casualties, all their KIA, all their dead were from one RPG. So, and another one took a mortar round to the top of the AAV, and it killed, it was an ambulance track, so there was only 9 in it. It killed those 9. So that was how the war was characterized, and that's what we're seeing now in this newest phase, this newest time in the war. There's so many things we could talk about. Just want to try to give you a little bit of a sense of what my experience was like and how I perceived the war from that AAV and one of the armored spearheads there. I know the bell rings about 6 minutes. People usually always stay, but is there any questions? I'd like to open it up and we talk about this if there's any questions on policy or experience or anything. So, yeah.
What about Basra?
Basra.
You said there wasn't a whole lot of fighting, and all we saw in the news was that Basra was this huge hang-up that the U.S. couldn't get in for a long time. How did that really go?
There was a hang-up. Actually, it was, what's the name of the port? Is it Qasar, who's the port at Basra? And they were going to do an amphibious operation there, and there were some problems there. They also mined the port. So there was some problems at Basra, but there weren't really that many. There still wasn't that much fighting. There was just a lot of demining, a lot of booby traps. There were some incidents at Basra, but again, the British took care of most of it. But they took them a while to clear the whole city. And I don't know exactly what the details were. I know there weren't many. I don't think there were any casualties taken in Basra. But there may have been. I can't say for sure. I mean, it definitely slowed you down. The one thing about the U.S., which is good for the U.S. soldiers and probably bad for the enemy, is there is nothing more important than saving U.S. lives. And you'll see American military doctrine, U.S. military doctrine, is completely shaped by this. How many people died in the Vietnam War? 56,000? How many people have died in combat operations since the Vietnam War to today? Less than 900. That's staggering, because it's not like we haven't been anywhere since Vietnam. And we have done a lot. They have totally revamped it. You know, the creed, you never leave a man behind, they live by that. You know, and if you take fire, they pull back. I mean, the firefights that we got into, I'm serious, they were like 2 or 3 RPGs, maybe a burst of machine gun fire. Our entire company, 208 men, 13 AAVs with Mark 13 guns on them, CAT, and we had 4 tanks assigned to us, all turrets turned, and we'd obliterate that area. And it's, you know, it's like you stop to protect, you know, and you make sure you don't usually leave these guys hung out to dry, which is completely opposite of how, for instance, Russia fought in Chechnya. They dropped an airborne unit in the mountains in Chechnya in 1995 and never resupplied them. The airborne unit ended up surrendering to a Chechen village. The village happened to be full of young children and elders, because all the young Chechens were in Grozny fighting the other Russians. And the elders took the surrender of a whole airborne unit of Russian, because they were just left out there. And that was it. And you don't see that too often. We did run short on food a few times. There were some very funny moments out there to me. I mean, I never felt like we were going to starve to death, but there were 3 days where we didn't have anything to eat. So we went to the highway where all the convoys were going, and we used our duffel bags, and we were picking up MRE rations, because, you know, the convoys, there's always a joke, or if you've seen Private Ryan, you kind of get the gist that supply always has better stuff than the combat units, right? So the supply guys, they open their MRE, I don't like that. They throw it out the window, I don't like that. They throw it out the window. We picked up 4 duffel bags full of food along the highway that we were using as the main supply route, and that's what we ate for 3 days till our next resupply came. And it was all discarded elements that Army and Marine supply convoys were just throwing out their windows. So they asked that I don't talk, but they think that was embarrassing. The commander thought it was embarrassing. The actual Marines thought it was really funny. But, yeah.
Thank you. What do you think of the fact that the United States claims that Iraq had weapons of mass destruction and they haven't been found yet?
Well, you know, I can't. It's interesting for me. I mean, having been in a few conflicts before and thinking about this one, I thought that personally I didn't think we had to go to war at this particular time for a lot of reasons. I'm not trying to take Madeleine Albright tack on it, where she said just recently it was a threat. We knew it was a threat, but it wasn't an imminent threat. I'm not trying to side with that part of the partisan politics, but it was just one of those things. I think there were a number of reasons they went to war. One of them was weapons of mass destruction. Certainly Saddam had used them against the Kurds in the late 80s. I don't know. I'm still wondering where all the conventional armor was, because there were a lot of, like just from the DoD field book, we haven't, as far as I know, they haven't found anything in those numbers, anything close to those numbers. And I know they're going to scout that place. But, I don't know. We came upon some weird stuff, but every time it turned out not to be. We used the chemical paper and detected every artillery round we came across. I walked into this one place at Salmon Pack military. We had attacked it during the night, took it over. Everything was pretty obvious, and then we walked into one room, and it was this house, it was a bunker, a bomb-proof bunker, had like 5-foot thick concrete walls, and I walk into a room, and there's a white 55-gallon drum in the middle of the room, and that's it. And I said, okay, I don't know what is in that drum, but if it's in a bomb-proof bunker, I'm out of here. And I just walked out, but I didn't find anything because I haven't heard anything. I don't know what it was. I don't know what happened to the weapons of mass destruction. I don't know if he had them. Maybe it's, old game of brinkmanship. I don't know. Saddam likes to talk. He's bluffed before. Maybe he was really in dire straits as far as weapons of mass destruction program. It's hard to say. Certainly there's a lot of controversy about that as a reason to go to war.
It appears that Rumsfeld and company may have prepared to refight the Desert Storm, and they failed to take into consideration what's going to happen in the aftermath. How much can they be faulted for that? It appears quite a bit.
We had a panel here last year, and we talked about that. And one of the fears that came up, I think Stan Taylor mentioned it, was he didn't think that the Bush administration had a grand strategist in the room. And so you can win the war because, yes, by the numbers we can win the wars or win the battles. But if the war is a longer war that includes conquering, vanquishing an enemy, rebuilding, nation building, and establishing a city or a country that actually works or functions or to our liking, then we haven't won the war yet by any stretch. I personally don't think they had a very good. I don't know if they had a plan. If they did, I don't know what the plan was. I mean, I know that it was June before they sent 4,000 extra military policemen into Baghdad to try to control the looting. Well, by June, everything's looted. That was 6 weeks, 7 weeks. It was a disaster. There's one U.S. Army Civil Affairs Battalion active duty. One. Part of the problem is, in my opinion, that the military is very small. I know that they say they can do it with the troops they have, but in the news that you can hear almost every day that, oh, I'm on my third deployment. Reservists are being called out for second and third deployments right now. In 1989, when the military started shrinking, it went from 18 divisions to 10. All U.S. military combat support went into the reserve status, which is why the U.S. Army Reserves are being hit very hard right now. They don't have the combat support to keep the guys with the guns that are shooting on the front lines and doing the patrols going. In my opinion, Rumsfeld will say that they're good. I think they're died. They only have 9,000 in Afghanistan. And that place is going right back to where it started. I mean, before October 2001, before we got in there. Taliban making inroads. It's basically still Special Forces mission for all. But, the 10th Mountain's back over there. I think they're stretched thin. The other part is, it's like the Marines said, we don't train to do peacekeeping. They don't want to do peacekeeping. The young guys that I was with would never have joined the Army if they thought they didn't have a chance to kill somebody. And I don't mean that in a bad way, but let's face it, if you're going to join a frontline combat unit, you kind of have that in you. You want to see. So then they don't want to do peacekeeping. If they train at it, the group I was with train at it very half-heartedly. They're not really designed to do that. So once all the units, the Iraqi units were sort of taken care of or disappeared and we couldn't find them, they go on patrols, but what do they really do? I mean, they're not nation builders. They're young guys, and like they said over and over and over to me 100 times, we're really good at killing things and breaking stuff. And that was kind of their personal creed. But that is the primary mission. I've really wandered off the topic on your question, but it is frustrating to see, because I don't know what the exit strategy is. I don't know what the grand plan is.
How can we watch the rest of your movie?
Going to get some limited theatrical, but it already showed in Europe, and I don't know if it's going to show in the U.S. So, anything else? Anything else you want to talk about? Hey, thanks for coming. I appreciate your time.